81% of Americans believe they have a book inside them that they should write. The problem is that writing a book is a daunting task, and 97% of books that get started never get finished. So all this to say that writing a book can easily become a life's task. And that's exactly why I'm so excited about today's episode, because my guest today is Chris Stanley. Chris has written 16 best-selling books. And the greatest thing about these books is that they are short. In fact, he calls them mini books. And with this method, you don't need to lock yourself away for months. You don't need to abandon your social life or stress yourself to the point of burnout. In this episode, we'll dissect how you can write a mini book and establish yourself as a leader in your industry in almost no time. Welcome to Build Your Thing, the podcast where we help content creators find their unique creative voice, build their tribe of loyal fans, and monetize their work. My name is Matt Giaro. Feel free to check out the show notes at any point in the description. And with that being said, let's get started. All right, Chris, welcome to the show.
Matt, I'm so glad to be here. Glad that you dared let me out of the back room and into public. So I appreciate you sharing your audience.
Love it, love it, love it. So yeah, for anyone listening, I met Chris, or we met on Substack. Basically, I think you started interacting on my stuff, and then I just checked out your Substack, and I found, hey, like this guy has a really interesting angle to book writing, and this is how we basically connected.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wrap my head around how much good content there is on Substack. Like I've never been a big Medium guy. And so going from LinkedIn, which is a lot shorter content typically there, to like a true writing platform for people who want to pour value. I was telling you right before we hit the record button, I feel like a kid with his floaties on. Like I can't even consume enough to understand how much value there is. So the fact that, you can even find value in what I'm bringing, is an honor, and I'm glad to be here. And I appreciate what you're doing over there, because it feels like every 3 days, no knock on your other 2 days, but every 3 days I'm picking up some tip that I'm like, I'm glad he said that. I'm not the only one thinking that, or I never would have thought of that. I'm getting something out of it of extreme value.
Awesome. Chris, so could you quickly introduce yourself? So you've written a lot of books, a lot of bestsellers. So yeah, let's just give us like the short version to get us really excited about what you have to share with us today.
All right. Well, the short headline version, if we were on LinkedIn, is I'm an author of 26 books, 16-time Amazon #1 bestseller in a category. I'll clarify that so people don't think I rose to beat romance authors. I did not. But in my category, #1. And basically, my world was transformed from, doing a really niche job in insurance to like writing about that industry and establishing an online business. And I largely credit it to books. And so as I continued to write books, because I just thought it was the best way to establish a credibility and to explore a topic deeply for myself to make sure I understood what I was talking about, I found that as I started making them shorter and shorter and more specific, that I felt like the audience resonated more. And so I started falling in love with small books, short books. Some people call them minimalist books. Eventually, I came on the term that Category Pirates used, which is mini books. And so that's now what I talk a lot about. In addition to running my company, is I talk a lot about how you can use mini books to grow your business, to grow your authority, to grow your expertise.
Awesome. I love that. So this is like, as I mentioned, like the fact that you talked about mini books, it totally resonated with me. I just did a quick research on Perplexity, where it actually says that, because I know that there are a lot of people who actually want to write a book, but I wasn't really sure about the numbers. So basically what it spits out is like 81% of Americans believe that they have a book inside them that they should write. So I definitely think that you are talking to, I think, a huge desire. Obviously, not everyone is going to actually wants to write a nonfiction book, but I think that 80% of my audience would be interested in simply writing a book because it establishes you as an authority. So how did you came up with this idea, basically?
Well, I kept getting, like I said, shorter and shorter with my writing. And it started off as like, I'm just writing 40,000 words on this topic, outlined it, mind mapped it, followed Chandler Bolt, which is amazing book, his book published. I followed it to a T before he redid it, and it's even better now. But like 6 years ago, I wrote my first book, literally using his book as like the do this next. Okay, stop, crease the page, go do it, right? And that's how I wrote my first book, but it was like 40,000 words. And it was like a month-long process to really get that done and out into the world. And that was me basically doing it full time. And so as time went on, and I started wanting to address certain topics I kept seeing pop up to my niche audience of insurance adjusters, I wanted to address different things that didn't need 40,000 words, but I was sick of getting the questions to. How do I network? How do I do a resume? That kind of thing. And so the kind of pivotal moment where the light bulb really went off was I had a co-author. We were writing a book called The Insurance Company Adjuster's Playbook. You can't get more boring than that unless you're in insurance. Then you might find it interesting. But it was basically, how do you get hired by an insurance company as an insurance adjuster? So we interviewed all these people, hiring managers of the biggest insurance companies out there. You see their commercials kind of thing. And we said, what does it take to get hired? What helps? What hurts? That kind of thing. And the section on resumes ballooned to about 15,000 words. And that was supposed to be a chapter. And it was like 15,000 words. And I'm like, we can't put 15,000 words of a resume into the book as one chapter. So we spun it off as a separate mini book. And it actually ended up being closer to 10,000 words by the time editing and everything was done. And that book sold 4 times better than the big book that included everything else you had to do. And so it made me feel like, okay, the more niche you go, we know that in business, you actually broaden your audience. The deeper you drill, the more exposure and oil, riches you're going to find. Well, it seemed like in many books, the same thing started applying. And it took this enormous burden of, if I want to write about a topic, I need a year of my life, basically, to write it, publish it, promote it, and to really build a whole business around that one topic. Instead, it allowed me to start writing specific things that needed to be addressed, but maybe didn't need to be a legacy nonfiction book, which is what I call big nonfiction books like, Atomic Habits. That's a legacy nonfiction book that will be there forever. And it's the older way of publishing a full nonfiction book. Not every topic needs that.
I love that. I remember interviewing Tiago Forte, I think, by the time this was recording, it was like 2 years ago, when he just came out with his Building a Second Brain book. Like he mentioned, like 2 years of grind, right, behind that one single book. So one of the interesting things that you mentioned on that I found, basically you mentioning on Substack, is that 97% of books that get started never get finished. So
yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. So basically you are solving 2 pain points at the same time. Number one, pain point for the author. So being able to get their book out quickly. Also with your process, establishing yourself as a best-selling author in a specific category on Amazon and all the other good stuff. But at the same time, you're also helping your target audience basically get results, all right? Because you can't get results if you can't finish the book. And how do you help people finish the book? By making it shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. The stats are crazy because you have kind of 2 stats, and I can't even remember which one's which, but one is 97% of books that get started and never finished, and that's by the author. So like the author starts writing the book and then he never finishes. And then the other stat is very similar, whether it's the 97 or it's 94%. They each have one of those, right? It's in the 90 percentile, both of them, is that readers don't finish their book, right? So it's like in the 90 percentile, we're missing all these books that could be published and potentially solve problems that people have. And then even those ones, that 3% or so that are getting published and making it to Amazon or whatever digital bookstore and out into the world, only 3% of those are getting, or 7% or whatever it was, are getting actually completed fully, which, like you said, if you don't finish a book, a lot of times, unless it's like a magnum opus like Atomic Habits, which, to be clear, it took me years to finish. I read like 50, 60%. And I'm like, I got what he's saying and it changed my life. but I didn't finish the book, right? But most books, if you don't finish it, you're not actually getting to the transformative moment. You're not having that epiphany or that call to action to change your life until usually towards the end. So if the reader doesn't finish it, it was good information. It felt good to read the book, but they actually maybe didn't change their life as a result.
Yep, that's 100% true. And I also think like, especially when you're like me, you're taking notes when you're reading, etc. Like when you have to go through those 350 plus pages, unless let's say you're Robert Greene and you have everything, you have something new to say in each paragraph. Well,
right.
Most of the time it's just the same thing but rewritten in 5 different ways, right? And you just
with different stories and different perspectives, which is all valuable if you're trying to transform somebody's perspective, because you got to hit it so many different ways. But by and large, most readers, I think, and I'm a voracious reader, at least I used to be, used to read a book a week or so, but most books felt like they were fluff. And so kind of the tagline of mini books is that it's no fluff, only the good stuff. So in my mini books that I write, very few stories about me. You will see them, but they're like 2 or 3 sentences long. Like it is quick to the point. This happened, bam, and now that's why I believe this. It's not, and this is how I felt that Sunday morning when I woke up, which is awesome. If you have the time to really dive into somebody's backstory, you want that emotional connection. But in my mini books, what I'm trying to do is literally say, okay, here's enough about me that I'm human, but here's what you need to do if you want to, do the same thing I did, and just jump straight to it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, let's just start with the beginning. So you have 4 stages when it comes to your mini book self-publishing process. Let's get started with first of all, perhaps
so much here.
Perhaps giving the audience kind of a 30,000-foot overview of what the 4 stages are, and then perhaps we could dig deeper into each one of those.
Absolutely. So the mini book self-publishing model and roadmap is like he said, Matt's saying 4 stages, and those 4 stages are not complicated. You're going to hear them and be like, well, duh, Chris, but that is most things. It's not hard to know what to do. A lot of times it's just hard to do it, or to know what order to do it in. And a lot of times the feedback I got when I started talking about mini books was, Chris, do you have just like a lead magnet you could give away? That's what I'd want, of like everything I'm going to have to do to get that book out. And I was like, yeah, I could give you that. And it was like, this is what I came up with, right? But basically stage 1 is prepping. So that is everything that goes into getting your book ready before you ever start writing. So that's prepping. Stage 2 is pinning. So now you're actually writing the book. You're putting the words down. You're filling out your manuscript. The 3rd stage is publishing. So now that we have this manuscript done, how do we get it out into the world? A lot of different ways you could do that, but that's the 3rd stage. And then the 4th stage is promoting. Now that it's out in the world, nobody cares. So how do you get people to care? How do you find the people, most importantly, that it would actually help and have impact on? And so that's what promoting is all about. A lot of times we kind of put a negative connotation to promoting or advertising, or it feels really selfish, but it's like, if you really believe your book could help somebody, then that person's probably searching for the solution online. And if you've got it and you're not helping them find it, it's just going to get lost. And so they're going to spend longer finding the solution than they needed to.
Absolutely. Like, I really love how easy and clear, and like how you're able to make each one of these steps start with the letter P. So it's the 4 P's, right?
I'd forget it otherwise. It'd be lost on me.
That's awesome. So like let's just start with stage number 1, prepping, right? So when it comes to prepping, so you have basically the title, the hook, subtitle, cover, chapter outline, and outline. Like, seems a lot of work, but I think that the first stage actually gives you the direction, the North Star to writing a book that has the chances to succeed.
Right. So a lot of people think about writing a book and think about opening up a blank document and starting to type, or maybe even doing a mind map, which I've done mind maps and they're great. But for me, the more I've written, the more I find that if I kind of do the legwork up front, that whole adage of like, if I have 6 days to chop down a tree or something like that, or 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend 5 sharpening my axe, right? Well, the prepping stage, I feel, is really where 70, maybe 80%, the 80-20 rule comes in. 80% of the battle's won to getting your manuscript complete. If you do it right, you're done. Like, it's going to happen. And it's kind of a little bit against the grain, some of the things I say to do in the prepping stage. I debated whether to stick with my against the grain because of saying you got to have your cover before you ever start. But for me, I talk a lot in the newer book called Mini Book Straitjacket about a power promise. And so in the prepping stage, what you're really trying to do is define what is that power promise you're making to the reader. What is the result they're going to get if they read, finish, and apply your book? And the crazy thing is, most of the time as authors, we don't even know when we start writing what we're about to promise. And we write the book. And then the reason why editing and everything gets so confusing is we didn't have a clear promise we were making from the very beginning of what that transformation was going to be, of what their life would look like differently from the very beginning. It changes everything. And I have an example, but I want to give you time to see if you want to spin it any direction from there. But I have an example of somebody I was talking to yesterday.
Yeah. Basically, like what you just said, like, this is true for book writing. It's true for writing an email. It's true for any type of content you're going to create, right? It's like being clear about, hey, what do you want the reader actually to walk away after to walk away with after consuming your content, right? If you can get clear on your idea by yourself, well, how do you want like the people reading to be clear about a takeaway, right? So like I find it, because like I'm writing a lot of blog articles, a lot of emails. It's like I always start with the idea first, and every time I see that editing takes too much time, it's simply because I messed up with the outline, right? It's like my thoughts weren't clear enough. I didn't, laid it out logically, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, please go ahead.
So like yesterday, an amazing member of our community reached out through Substack and was like, hey, I'm working on this book, following your Mini Book Straitjacket model to a T. Here's where I'm at. And he was still in the prepping phase. And he was saying, I've got, the title. He told me the title, and it was a good title. The subtitle, he's like, what do you think of the subtitle and the cover? And I'm like, one, what cover did you model after? Because I'm a big proponent of go find New York Times best-selling covers that people are used to seeing and get design inspiration from that, rather than trying to create your own off of a Canva template, because Canva templates don't look like New York Times best-selling covers for some reason. And so I create all my covers now based on, books that have thousands of reviews. So I was like, okay, first, what's the cover that you're modeling after? Because maybe it's a good one, but to me, that doesn't look like quite what I think you're going for. And then two, your subtitle seems a little soft on the transformation. And that's really where we typically communicate the transformation of what's going to happen if you do this. And his was really good in the topic, but it was very broad. It was like gain self-confidence, be at your best. I don't remember everything, but it was like 3 statements like that. And I was like, well, that's really good. But like, I still don't know what your book's about. Like, if I read this book, am I going to have self-confidence to be confident enough to go ask out the girl in the next 7 days or the next 2 hours? Like, why do I need that self-confidence? What can I accomplish with it? Because if you're doing a mini book, you zero in on like, they want this one result. They want to ask out the girl. And so it was for a youth. He said, this is for youth. I was like, well, you got to address the pain point specifically of why they need confidence to play the song, to ask the girl out, whatever. Even if that's not the result somebody's looking for, the fact that it's that specific makes them be able to envision it. And they go, oh man, yeah, I want that kind of confidence that I could walk up and ask a girl out that I haven't been able to, right? As a teen, that's all you're wanting to do. You're like, hey, I don't have the confidence to talk to people. And so having him drill down on that is an example of, hey, now when I go to my outline, it's going to be totally different than if I was saying, hey, have self-confidence to be the best dad you can be in your 40s. Totally different book, right? Yep. But same topic if you kept it broad. But when you niche down and you really make that power promise of like, this is what we're talking about, now you can outline with super clarity, and you're not confused about, well, should I talk to young people? Should I talk to old people? Should I talk about dating as examples, or should I talk about being a dad as examples? Suddenly all that mountain of information goes away. And I call it a pile of dirt in one podcast I did. And I said, it's just a big pile of dirt, your knowledge and years of experience. And by sifting through it, you actually find the gold. But when you really narrow down, it's like using a sifter. You're letting all that other dirt fall through because it's not relevant to what we're talking about. And we can just find the few things we need to write about to, write a 10,000 word book.
I love that analogy. So with all the noise out there, like the only way to simply cut through the noise is by making a very, very specific promise, right? It's not like, as you mentioned, like it's self-confidence. It's, get organized, be productive. Like, what's the end goal? What's the exact end goal? Because it's only by being laser focused that you'll be able to grab that attention.
Right. It's one thing if you're going for New York Times bestseller and you have Penguin Random House at your back.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going on the Daily Show. I'm doing all this stuff. Well, I need to talk to everybody. But we know on the internet, as self-published authors, as content creators, when you talk to everybody, you talk to nobody. And so you have to like zero in with, if you're looking at mini books, with a mini book to say, this is closer to building my core tribe than it is reaching the masses. Books aren't about reaching the masses. And many books aren't. They're about reaching that one person who then becomes a raving fan, signs up for your Substack, buys your course, gets your coaching program, right? Like that's what it's going to help you do.
Absolutely. So how, like, once you have this promise, how do you come up with the outline? Do you have kind of a specific framework when it comes to, hey, in the first chapter, we're going to talk about that. In the second chapter, we're going to talk about this. Like, how do you approach that?
So how I approach it personally and how I approach people that I coach is you get three options. Only because I'm trying to be a nice guy, giving you three options. But there are only three.
Give us one option. Give us the one option that works all across the board.
People need options, at least to feel like this is their book. So I settled on three, and it was looking back to my books. What were these three different ways I had written books? And I was like at 20 books at the time. I was like, how had I written these nonfiction books on accident? And so I looked and it was like, okay, you can really write with what I call the W's, the sequential outline, or the 10 promises. And the W simply says, what about insert topic? So we'll use my book because it's easy to remember. What are mini books? So that's a W, right? Why should I write a mini book? That's a W. On and on. Who writes and who reads mini books? On and on and on. And of course, you have the H. So my editor likes to tell me it's the WW something H model. I mean, no, that's not what we're calling it. It's the W's, right? It's the W's model, but you also have a chapter on the how. But each one of those is one chapter. So you end up with like 6 chapters. And sometimes you might need a little, preface chapter that kind of gets somebody processed in a niche or something to be like, hey, this is what we're talking about in this book. Now let's jump into it. But most of the time, you can just use those 6 chapters and run with that. The other one is sequential, which is one we're very common and familiar with, is like, the step by step. So like, what am I doing? I have 4 stages here, right? I could make those all chapters or sections of the book, and each step, of the 10 steps is a chapter, right? So step 1, choose your title and subtitle. Step 2, do this, right? And you're just guiding people through a sequential process, start to finish. And so that's the second one. And I have very specific times when you use each one, but I think that would go way too deep on one thing. Yep. And then 10 promises is just write out the 10 biggest mistakes or things that people could do differently in your industry to now have a new outcome. So I wrote a book called The Misleading Money Mantra, and that book was to my kids. I was in my like 35 at the time, I think. And I was writing to my kids about my way of thinking about money and the world and time and life currencies. And hey, these are the 10 lies the world tells you about money and why you need to put, emphasis on chasing money, when in reality, once you get to a certain point, it doesn't make you much happier. You now have to shift. And so it was those 10 misleading money mantras But then when you flip them on their head, they're a promise. So the 10 promises, or the 10 biggest mistakes, however you want to look at it, that of what you can change. So those are the 3 ones. And so I let my coaching students choose from that. Like, choose one of those 3, decide which one fits your topic best. And then that's it. Throw everything else away. That's your outline, write chapter titles, and let's get down to like outlining the individual chapters. And all that happens in usually like 20 minutes.
I love it because it's really simple and effective. Like it's really straight to the point. And this actually reminds me also about when it comes to, let's say, writing blog posts, right? It's exactly the same thing. Like you have the same thing, right? Like you have like the 10 promises is basically a listicle, right? You want to talk about mistakes, you want to talk about problems, you want to talk about resources. What do you want to talk about, right? And then, hey, you have a proven format, and then just follow a step-by-step template on simply filling in each one of the, writing out each one of those chapters. So this brings us basically to the second step, which is penning. So once you have your 4 chapters outlined, how do you approach writing each chapter?
So before I even leave prepping, this is like the part where the author creative and all screams. It's like, okay, I have my chapter titles. I'm going to run and start penning this thing. And it's like, actually, no, now you need to really outline. You chose your chapter outlines, but now we need to outline each chapter. And so what I do is I do 3 points per chapter. So big H2 headings, if you think as the blog post, because that's how I do it, H2 headings. And then under each H2 heading, or 3 points, are 3 subpoints, or H3 headings. And so now let's take an example, the power promise, like, oh, I need to choose a title and a hook, a subtitle and a transformation, and a cover, right? So those are my 3 big points in one of my chapters of the power promise. And then I just have 3 subpoints explaining things about the title and hook, things about the subtitle. And so now all of a sudden, it's just filling in the blanks when I get to penning, right? Like, I literally know exactly where I'm going, and my formatting is the big hard part of that is done. So when I get done with the book, I don't have to go back and use vellum or something else. My formatting is done before I even get to penning, because I'm just typing in normal paragraph text and then adding pictures if I want.
This is so interesting. So, like, while you were actually explaining that, I was just thinking about, hey, you mentioned, 10,000 words. I have 10 chapters, let's say the 10 promises or the 10 mistakes. And all I have to do is I'll only have to do to write 10 blog posts around 1,000 words each.
Right. What do you think I'm doing each week, Matt, on the Substack? I'm writing a book and sharing the chapter with you guys. That's all I'm doing, right? I'm like, okay, where am I going? In 2 months, this book might be done. So I'll write the chapters, share it with people, and that's my content. And then if it proves good enough, resonates enough, gets tweaked as I get feedback, that ends up becoming a book. And so, it's a simple process, and not every chapter should make it. But if you have this process figured out, it really does work, and it allows you to go really fast. So moving on to penning, I mean, once you have that, I could say go to town and start writing, but for what I teach in the mini book Straitjacket book that got released this month, and what I teach my students is that, hey, you don't want to have to guess what to write next, even more so. Like, yes, you know this much, but not everybody's a Matt who's writing tons of blog posts. Not everybody's me who's written a bunch of books and blog posts, and they get overwhelmed even staring at one subpoint. They're like, what should I write? What should my sentence be? How do I know how to start it? So I use a 1-3-1 formatting. I learned it from Nicholas Cole of Ship 30 for 30, and I fell in love with it. And it's a way of writing digitally online. It kind of drags the reader down the page. It's not classical by any stretch. There's not block paragraphs. I'm writing one opening hook for that subpoint. So if we're talking about a title, or a cover, what's that hook going to be to get somebody to read sentence number 2? So like, in my chapter, Create a Power Promise, it starts off, the number one thing you could do to make your book successful, probably got you hooked at that point, is to make a strong promise to your reader. Well, how do I do that, right? You want to know. And so that is a hook. It's just a hook. And then it's just copywriting through the whole book, really. And then 3 sentences after that, which are the meat and potatoes. So like, we have the appetizer, we have the meat and potatoes, which is, or 2 sides, which is the 3 sentences. And then we have dessert at the end. And so that now becomes 5 sentences on that one subpoint, and you do 2 of those per subpoint. And like, I get very specific about that. And if you read my last book, I wrote the book almost verbatim that way to prove it could be done, because too many people were telling me, I get overwhelmed. I start going off on bunny trails, and I'm like, how? Just do this. Like, you can't, there's no room to deviate. You have to tell them what you have to tell them right now. And if you do that for any one of those outlines, the cadence that I line out, you're around 10,000 words, maybe a little over.
Awesome.
But you end up with it. You can't mess it up.
Interesting. So how do you then approach the editing process?
So the end process, like publishing, or you mean penning?
Yeah. The editing process when it comes to penning. So you're following the 131 formula throughout the whole thing, right? So the hook is going to be following 131, the subpoints 131, right?
Everything.
Yeah. So now you're done with the first draft. How do you approach editing? Do you edit everything at the end, or?
It just depends on the book, really. I like to edit as I go, which a lot of editors would probably freak out and say, "Don't!"
Wow.
But they'd probably lose their minds. But here's why: I like to edit as I go because I hate editing. And if I get to the end and I have, example, 40,000 words to edit, I have a book called "Remote on a Boat" about how to live and work remotely on a sailboat full time. I do that with my family. So like, lots of people would like to read that book, but it's been written for 2 years and I refuse to edit it. I've gone through 2 edits. I've hired an editor, but I hate editing. So like, if I edit as I go, that book's actually going to see the light of day.
Yeah.
So I've used editors. Simple Online Business, which was 2 books ago. It was edited with an editor. I paid $1,500 for a mini book, 10,000 words to be edited, which I was like, man, I've got to find a better way. And then I started playing around with ChatGTP being my editor. And with mini books, if you're following the format even loosely of what I just outlined, the thing with editing is a lot of times they're fixing the bad prepping you did. So like, there's no developmental editing in this type of structure, which is, does this all make sense? You already made it make sense in the prepping stage.
Yeah.
There's no, did you go on too long on a topic? You can't. You only have 3 sentences. So like, it's already predetermined. There's not a lot to cut or fluff. So I use ChatGTP now to edit the book, and I have a whole prompt I give my community members that I use, that I throw it into, and it tells me these sentences are confusing first. These ones are in passive voice, and gives me options of, hey, this is the sentence you messed up and is confusing. Here's 3 options I think you might like. And I hit 3 or 1, whichever one I want, hit enter, goes on to the next one, and then it spits it out at the end. And my whole thing's edited, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes per chapter.
And
so
it's free.
I write the chapter, and it's free. It's $20 a month. Yeah. I'm using it anyways for other stuff. So but that to me is my editing process now for most mini books. Now, if you want to do a legacy nonfiction book, like you take the mini book process and you just want to expand on it, you're probably going to need an editor to make sure that certain stuff is tight, to make sure that you're not losing the reader in a long story, or it doesn't feel relevant. They don't get the connections, right? But in this scenario, it's almost non-existent.
Awesome. So do you want us to jump into the next to the next step, which is publishing?
Yeah, so stage 3 is publishing.
Yeah.
And most people want to publish to Amazon. It's the largest bookstore in the world. And I wouldn't argue with them. Do it. It's great, but a lot of people are overwhelmed by it. I didn't think that's where people were getting overwhelmed. But when I started talking about it, I kept hearing, I just am overwhelmed about the process of publishing to Amazon. And they would pay $6,000 to a publishing company to have them help them publish and do the cover and get it in paperback, which is all like an hour-long process. And I'm like, you paid how much? $6,000? No. So I started immediately writing posts that's why you see me writing these posts about publishing to Amazon, because I'm like, this is crazy. Don't do that. Like, spend $6,000 promoting your book. Don't spend $6,000 creating the book. And so, but publishing is really not hard. if you've already got everything tight, you've already got your formatting done, through the process. Really, it comes down to a little bit of research. And this is where us as self-published authors fail, myself included, the most, is we get a book done. We're so proud of ourselves. We pat ourselves on the back, and then we refuse to do 2 hours worth of research to make sure our keywords are good. You know this about blog posts, Matt. I hate keyword research, like with a passion. I'll write a blog post all day long, but don't tell me to go look at Google Analytics. It just drives me up a wall, right? I just want to write, leave me alone. But like doing keyword research about how to get your book to actually show up in search results, writing a book blurb and a description of the book, and choosing categories is really all around research. And so that is what they call collectively metadata on Amazon, and the back end of blog posts is metadata, right? And it's the same thing with books. Is how does the intraweb basically find your book? And too often we just mail that in because we're done. We're done. All our creative energy zapped, and now we're moving on to publishing. But that's really what publishing is all about, is getting that stuff right.
Yep, because this will make the things like way more easier in terms of promoting the book, in terms of people discovering you or discovering the book organically, and so on and so forth, right?
Right, because one of the huge strategies that I see in the book I'm wanting to write is called "Damn the Amazon," which is, sounds like I'm cursing, but it's not. It's creating a dam in the Amazon River, or in this case, the Amazon bookstore, to generate power for your business. And you can't do that. You can't use all those people rushing through Amazon or through Google with blog posts if you're not SEOing, if you're not doing the metadata for your book. Mm-hmm. And so you can get a ton of juice from Amazon if you would just do these things. And it's hard, and it's annoying, and it's painful, but it's not actually very time consuming. It's just, you have to know what to do, and you have to take the time to actually do it, even if it's not your strength. But you can get a tremendous boost to your business that way. But if you don't do it, it's only your boost. That's the only, organic boost is going to happen then.
And that's basically the whole point. Why are you publishing on Amazon? It's simply because you want to get that organic juice, right? It's the same thing when people just try to write a blog post and they don't do keyword research. That's not how it works, folks. You need to first
might as well not have written it.
Yeah.
Your mom enjoyed it though.
The interesting part about your framework is that you added, like some people get lazy to think like, okay, let me just put my book on Amazon, and Amazon is going to take care of the rest, right? You have like an extra step, like as important as actually writing the book, outlining the book, etc. You also have a stage number 4, which is promoting. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So once your book is live in Amazon, now really the 80-20 rule kicks in. You are 20% done with your book, is how I try to tell myself to think about it, because the hardest part is now getting people to discover your book, find your book, who actually needs your book. And I have 26 books, and if you look through my catalog on Amazon, you'll see some that have like 350 reviews. Mm-hmm. They've sold 20-something thousand copies, or been downloaded 20-something thousand times. And then I have other ones who have like 7 reviews and been downloaded 1,000 times or whatever. The difference is whether I promoted it or not. That is literally the only difference. And I promoted it because I was proud of that book. But some of my books that I think are the best do not get discovered. Nobody knows about them or cares about them because I'm not promoting them. So once you get this book into the world, you've got to find ways to help readers find that book. And so there are a few key ways that I don't think are mind-blowing, but the more I talk about it, the more people tell me, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know you could do that. So I'll go through a list real quick. Is number 1, great way to promote your book is through any channel you already have existing, but do discounted pricing. Like just go from my book was $2.99 to now it's 99 cents. Oh, my book's on pre-order. I'm going to make it 99 cents and tell everybody it's going up to $2.99 when it's released. I just did that, right? Mm-hmm. So I got pre-orders because it was discounted. So that's a way to promote. Another way to promote is using your email list, even if it's at full price. Hey, this is the result you're going to get. You've been begging me to tell you how to publish to Amazon. Now here's the book, right? If you wanted that result, here it is. it's not hard, but if you don't tell people about it, if you don't sell it to them, if you don't show the transformation that can happen, they're not going to connect those dots themselves, even if they've been on your list for a year or two. It doesn't matter. I have 12,000 insurance adjusters on my email list, and almost none of them buy a book unless I'm like really put the juice on in the email, really explain why it's valuable, and give them the buy now button. Doesn't happen typically organically. And then, so you got your email list, ads. There are a lot of different ways you can do ads with books, and I'm not a huge Facebook guy. I don't like LinkedIn for ads. They're way too expensive. Facebook is apparently less expensive, but I'm not on Facebook. So,
and you know what? Like I'm banned from Facebook for life. So yeah, Facebook is not an option.
That's what you get, Matt. That's what you get, you know? But there are options specifically for authors that are way less expensive than the traditional social media route, because if you think about social media as a whole, you're competing with Coca-Cola for ads. That's who you're competing with. They got an unlimited budget. They can pay $9 a click if they want to sell a case of soda. I don't know how their profit works, but they do it, right? But for authors, you're selling a $2.99 book or 99-cent book, and you hope to at least be close to break even as like a lead generation tool, right? I'd like to be close to break even. And so using author-specific ads, like on Amazon, they have an ads portal specifically that you can promote your book through, and you can promote yourself to other books, and you can get really specific. Like, I want to promote to this book. This is the audience I want to promote to. I want to promote to books in this category. Another, my favorite is BookBub. BookBub is the biggest email list of people looking for deals on
Interesting.
books. And so they have over 1 million people on this list. And so if I say, I want to promote my book, Simple Online Business, to an audience who has clicked Business Made Simple ads by Donald Miller or whatever, I want to send them to him, his audience, basically, that has clicked something of his. And so I set that up, and for, usually I bidding, $1 to $2 a click, and you don't always pay that much, but you're getting people for a fraction of the cost of what you would anywhere, and they're voracious readers. So it might not always be profitable, but you're typically getting people who are going to read your book and review your book, which is huge. So BookBub, amazing platform. The other thing they're great for is they do featured deals every day. And these featured deals are different than the ads. The ads are at the bottom of their featured deals. And so these featured deals, I did one with my book called God is Like a Geyser, where you submit it, you say, hey, my book was $3.99. If you give me a featured deal, I'll discount it to $0 for free, or 99 cents or whatever it is. And I reached 12,000 people in 2 days. They downloaded that book. And that's how I ended up getting 20-something thousand downloads, was it got pushed to tens of thousands. I think it was 70,000 people for that 1 day promo. And it was like $400. And so whether that's worth it or not, that's up to you. But to me, I went from a nobody Christian author to like, I have 300 reviews on my book, which everyone's like, how in the world did you do that? Well, promoted the heck out of it for years. And then finally BookBub was like, yeah, we'll give you that deal. So that's the other platform. Any questions on that? I got 2 more really but it.
Yeah. Like I would simply like to tease the listeners to, if they want to know like what the 2 others are, simply check out the link in the description. So unless you don't want to tease people, but I think it's a good thing.
Oh yeah, I love to tease them. There's so much more to this process. I mean, it's like anything; it's nuanced, right? Yes, you could take and you could say, I need to make my book title a hook. Okay, well, how do you do that? What is the good hook? And here's a hint: go look at other people, model after other people with all of these things. Don't recreate the wheel.
And I think like your writing process is a great one to model. So, Chris, is there anything that you want to add?
I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I would say that something I'm really passionate about, the more I talk about this, and the more I see people writing mini books and saying, hey, I used your book to write a book. It's amazing. seeing people do that, and I'm seeing other people like Jamie and JD and stuff writing minimalist books, right? The minimalist author, look him up. He's amazing. And writing these books that are short, to the point, make a big impact in people's lives. But most people fall short on the publishing for the organic promotion and then the actual active promoting. And so there's just no impact if you don't do that second half of this journey. Yeah. And so I'm getting really excited about helping people do more of that, because I see it all falling apart. They get the book done, the manuscript done, they publish 15 books or whatever, but like they all have 3-star review, 3 reviews. And I'm like, I've been there. I know what that's like. You're in purgatory. You don't want to go promote that book now. So how do we get those books alive and in people's hands?
I love it. I love it. Chris, thank you very much for sharing all of these interesting insights with the audience. If people want to connect with you, want to know more about you, perhaps check out your different books, courses, coaching offers, what's the best? Where should they go?
Best thing for mini books is minibookpublishing.com. That'll take you to our Substack, and you can find tons of free material there. You'll find some premium material, like all the chat GTP prompts I use for doing things like editing or whatever. We got weird ones for all sorts of things. But minibookpublishing.com is what I would say. If you're an email person, you're like, I really want to email you. No problem. Chris at chris-stanley.com. I'm sure Matt will put it in the show notes, but it's Chris at chris-stanley.com.
Yeah. So I think I won't put it in the show notes simply because, all those spammy bots, etc. I don't want you to get spammed by, YouTube and iTunes bot. But yeah, I mean, if you really want to get in touch with Chris, you'll be able to, you'll find a way. Like you're just going to rewind it and just, simply write.
Look at how my name's spelled in the show notes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome, Chris. Thank you very much for coming to the show. It was a pleasure talking to you. And we'll catch up soon.
All right, Matt. Thanks.
All right, so hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And as always, you're going to find all the links we mentioned in the show notes. And if you're a content creator or want to become one and want to monetize your knowledge online, then be also sure to check out my free emails, because in my daily emails, you're going to learn how you can speed up your content creation workflow to create more content faster and thus attract more clients online in less time. It's the first link in the description. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and I see you next week.